Hi, it's Amy again, and I am recording a little prenatal yoga session. I just want to demonstrate a few postures, few flowy movements, exercises, whatever you want to call them, that are conducive to creating space in your pelvis and in your low back. More comfort when you're pregnant. Might not matter how pregnant you are for these things to give you that space and help you feel a little bit more comfortable. So the first thing I want to mention when it comes to prenatal yoga, I think just anatomically speaking, the most basic thing that it's good to understand is how the uterus, which is just getting bigger every day, is attached inside of you to your pelvis. And most of us have heard about round ligaments, or we've just heard that term. Two round ligaments that attach from the front sides of the uterus to the front of the pelvis. Those are a couple of the attachments, and ones that usually get the most attention because some of the movements that we take throughout a typical day, closing a door, reaching up for something, even walking down the street, can affect those ligaments. They are super stretchy, but can sometimes get a little twingy. And you might use a word a little stronger than twingy to describe what you feel if you've ever felt that one of those ligaments affected. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that so that people know that it's normal to feel those kind of abrupt and elastic sensations. Know that there's ligaments there, they're doing their job, and sometimes when we move too quickly or in too dynamic a way, we can affect what we're feeling. But the big attachment that concerns, or we need to consider really when we move through yoga postures, is the one that attaches at the back of your uterus to your sacrum, your uterosacral ligament. So if you take the palm of your hand to the very center of the back of your pelvis, not so high that it's on your low back, but right at the center of your pelvis in the back, your palm of your hand is about as big as your sacrum, so you'll likely have your hand right there. If you can imagine that right on the inside of that and attached to the back of your uterus is a thick round ligament, which is the strongest attachment of your uterus to your bony skeleton. So it gives a lot of support to your uterus, which when you consider that support in combination with gravity and the fact that we spend a lot of time standing up on 2 feet throughout the day, gravity's taking the belly when we're upright. Let me just come onto my knees. When we're upright, say your belly is quite big, your gravity is obviously taking it straight down to the ground, but if the strongest attachment of your uterus is right back here, gravity is taking the weight of your uterus this way. You can imagine why it's easy for a pelvis to tilt into an anterior position and really get pinchy and compressed in the low back. So what we see a lot in labor and what we practice a lot in prenatal yoga is just ways of leaning forward, of keeping the uterus forward and out of the pelvis, the weight of it, and letting it as much as possible hang from its attachment straight down with gravity. So I hope that all made sense. I get a little wordy, as most of you who maybe are watching this know. But the first opening or flowy exercise that we'll take in a yoga practice, a prenatal yoga practice, quite often is cat-cow pose, where in the cow part of the pose, we don't get dumpy or let the belly and ribs just flop down. We instead get nice and long and find extension in our spines from the space between your sitting bones all the way to the top of your head. And then exhaling, tuck your tail and round your back. That'll feel like a hug right around your baby, right around your belly. Inhaling and taking that hug and just spreading softness across the front of your body, lengthening your spine. And exhaling, tucking the tail. And you can carry on moving through this. We'll spend about the next minute just rocking through this at your own pace. You don't need to follow my pace. But letting yourself have a chance to experience, to feel what your sacrum feels like, when you rock your pelvis in these two directions, back and forth, what it feels like for your sitting bones, those bones at the very bottom of your pelvis, as you rock, usually in the extension, they come wide, and in the flexion or the tuck of your tail, rounding of your back, you feel your sitting bones drawing closer together. So close your eyes and just keep rocking through these two shapes, knowing all the while that you are giving all of your abdominal organs a really nice massage. Every time you breathe in and out, you spread out and soften, and then also engage your pelvic floor, some of your abdominals, muscles across your low back. Take about 2 or 3 or 4 more breaths. Nice. So one of the next times that you breathe in, you can pause. And because sometimes it's uncomfortable for people to be on their hands and knees for a while, take a little bit of a break. You can bring your knees a little closer together or wider apart, whatever's more comfortable. Sit back on your heels and just circle your wrists around. It's also possible, I don't really have a low stool or a bench right now, but I do have a violin case, and actually I'll demonstrate a way to take pressure off of your wrists. When you're on your hands and knees, you don't actually have to be on your hands. You can rest your forearms on some sort of a prop and be doing exactly the same thing. And your wrists don't have to be taking any weight at all. Your hands can just hang relaxed. But it's nice to know that you can take this opening on at your coffee table or against a chair. You can take it standing up or leaning against something. One of the, I think, the most lubricating and healthy things you can do for your low back. Nice. So, once you've given your wrists a bit of a break, I'll move the violin case aside and demonstrate a lunge. So, because the movement of taking your foot, if I was going to pick up my knee and take my foot onto the ground, a lot of times we take this movement so quickly that we don't notice everything that's involved in getting the foot to the ground rather than the knee. But there are a lot of things happening, and I think maybe someone with extended round ligaments and a big round belly might notice more than those of us who aren't at that part of our lives or who got that going on. But so the way I like to get into a lunge, rather than to take the foot onto the ground, heel toe it up to the hand and inch the knee back. It's a lot of steps and kind of a lot of engagement of the abs and those ligaments. I like to take downward facing dog, spreading out my fingers, tuck the toes, let my pelvis pull me up and back, and stretch for a bit. My arms have to be relatively strong to take this shape, but they are strong. I can relax my neck here and feel the weight of my head hanging off of it. My knees are quite bent. I'm pushing my sitting bones up and back. And if my belly is big and heavy, sometimes this posture could give me really great relief, just getting that belly out of my pelvis. I might take my feet wider. If my belly was big enough, needed the space between my thighs, I can stretch in this way. But then walking slowly, my hands back toward my feet. Nice. And I'm just going to step my feet up because I'm not sure if I'm still in the frame. But once I have my hands and feet close, I'm going to bring my elbows up onto my thighs and just rest, which is a good idea after I've been upside down for a while, to just take my head and my heart, get them level with my hips. But also notice my position right now, that if my belly were full of baby, where my uterus is mostly attached, or mainly rather attached to my pelvis, I've got my belly, all the weight of that baby hanging straight down toward the ground. So from here, once I feel like I've had a chance to regroup, I'll take my hands onto my thighs, press myself up to standing, take a couple steps forward so I stay in the frame of this video, and then come right back down with wide feet, hands to the ground, lots of support with my hands on the ground. If the ground's too far away, even with my knees bent, I can take that violin case again, use my hands on that. You can take your coffee table, you can take a yoga block, a few pillows, and then baby step one foot back. Maybe a few little hops, wiggle my toes back, relax my knee down onto the ground, and sink into a lunge. So my front foot's quite wide, my back knee's on the ground. I might, if my support is high enough, rest onto my elbows. If you're doing this posture with the support of a low stool, it might be accessible to bring your elbows down for some easier support. So just take a few breaths here, stretching into your hip flexors. You can also take your hands, walk them back, stretch into the back line of your front leg. I've brought my hips back. They're a little bit further back than that back knee, but I've pulled the sole of this front foot off the ground, resting on the heel. My knee is bent enough, I don't know if you can see it, but it's bent enough so that I can give my pelvis that same little anterior tilt that I do when I'm in cat-cow pose. And I can use my pelvis to push back, drawing length up the back of my leg. Belly's inside. If your belly is big and pregnant, it's on the inside of your right thigh, just relaxing, again, hanging pretty much straight down to the ground from where it's most firmly attached. I'm going to glide forward, bring my hands up onto that support if the ground feels too far away. Tuck the back toes, pick up that knee, and with lots of support from my hands and my arms, step that back foot forward and take the other side. Nice. So the movements never have to be really big. I'm never hoisting my limbs around and just extending a foot back quickly. Taking my time, resting down if there's room, staying on my hands if there's not. Relaxing into the sole of the front foot. And just taking a look at where my sacrum is compared to where a pregnant belly would be hanging in space. Front foot's wide. Spending a few breaths in the lunge and then walking your hands back into this posture called the half splits, Ardha Hanumanasana. The hips are above the back knee. I'm on the heel, the center of the heel of the front foot, and that knee's bent so I can push my pelvis back. Draw my toes closer to my shin, maybe spread out my toes. Take another breath, relax my belly on the inside of my left thigh. And then gliding back and finding that forward fold again. Tuck in the back toes, pick up the knee. Lots of support from the hands and the arms while I baby step that foot back up to the top of the mat. Nice, I'm going to get rid of this prop. Take my hands back down to the ground and walk back into downward facing dog. Stretch a couple more breaths up and down the sides of my body. And then release my knees gently down to the ground. So again, my belly, if my uterus was full of baby, it's hanging straight down from where it's most firmly attached. Twisting my upper spine, I'm going to bring my left elbow down onto the ground just below my shoulder. In order to do that, I had to bend my right elbow a little bit, so now I'm going to press it straighter. This is going to twist my upper spine. I'm going to look up over my right shoulder. I might find a little wag of my tail, feeling how when I press it one way, the twist feels a little deeper. Rock it the other way, feels a little more shallow. After a couple breaths, I can look back down at the ground, replace the hand instead of the elbow, and take the other side. Elbow comes down just right where the shoulder was, or where the hand was. Pushing my other hand into the ground to straighten that elbow a bit, maybe completely straight, and then look up over that shoulder, rock my hips to and fro. When I'm ready to release, I'll look back down at the ground, bring that hand back. And after a twist, it's nice to reset the spine with the shoulders and the pelvis by rocking through cat-cow again. Lengthening the spine on inhalations, flexing it on exhalations. Taking a couple more breaths. So one of the next times that you breathe in, you can pause in that length. Take your knees a little bit wider. Go gentle with this too, because your inner thighs, it's a bit of work for them to step your knees wider. You can slide your big toes closer. Press your hips back toward your heels. Plenty of space for the belly in between the thighs. And then release and come forward. It might be that the ground is accessible for your forehead. Good place to rest. It might be that you need to bend your elbows and stack your hands. Rest your forehead on your hands if the ground is too far away. It might also be that you need even a little more space than that. And so you take your prop and you bring that underneath as well. But here is a really great place to let your belly, your abdominals completely relax. The weight of your uterus is hanging straight down toward the ground. You've got a lot of flexion in your joints. You're folded up in thirds pretty much, but if you can soften into that compression behind your knees and in the front of your hips, then also soften into all of your abdominals. Soften into the space around your heart. Take a few nice big breaths. Releasing. Pressing yourself up, if you use the prop and get it out of the way, I just want to show one counter posture. Well, maybe we'll do actually two counter postures to that child's pose. So when you bring your upper body up, leaving your legs just as they are, you can take your hands around behind you and pressing down with the tops of your feet and your hands into the ground. You can let your hips float gently off of your feet. And you might rise up an inch or two. You might find that there's space to rise up higher. Only moving into length, never into anything pinchy. Trying to keep the back of my hips nice and wide. Just pressing up high enough to a place where I can enjoy this feeling of spreading out across the front of my body. Taking a few breaths. I might imagine my heart being pulled up to the ceiling, or my navel, or my pubic bones. Or I might try to press more firmly into the ground with the tops of my feet and my hands. Just enjoying a breath or two and then gently lowering back down. Nice. And you might like to take another child's pose after that. Just to counter back and forth, rocking into one shape and then back into another, balancing the two back and forth. The second counter pose to child's pose I'm going to demonstrate is another one that's also a little bit active. So coming up from child's pose, you've got props, getting them out of the way, crawling onto your hands and your knees again. So again, taking the knees from quite wide to hip width distance apart, you can do a little gingerly. And this is a variation of side plank pose. So from this position with the belly hanging straight down toward the ground, we're going to peel it open a little bit, and I'll take the left side first so that I can look at you. You'll slide the left leg back, roll the heel in and down. I like to take the right foot back just a little bit to assist my balance. Then I'm going to take the left hand up onto my hip. Keep looking at my right hand. I said I would look at you. But I'll look at my right hand and really spread my fingers out wide. Make sure my wrist isn't trying to do all the work of supporting me. But I'll draw my left elbow back. Reach a little more through the outer edge of my left foot. Take a few breaths. Might feel good to stretch the arm up. Might feel good to reach it and extend it in the opposite direction of my leg. But it might feel good to just leave my hand on my hip. Just taking another breath. And then releasing. Making sure you come onto the ball of that back foot before you bring your knee in. And then trying the other side. Extend the right leg out. Roll the heel in and down. Again, I like to take the left foot back just a little bit, and then bring the right hand up onto my hip. Reaching through my foot, maybe stretching the arm up, maybe taking it forward, maybe leaving it on my hip. Just moving into an expression of the posture with my arm that feels comfortable. Taking another breath, and then releasing back onto my hands and knees. Always nice again to just sort of recalibrate with this cat-cow pose. Nice. And that's really as many postures as I wanted to demonstrate in this first little prenatal video. Come and sit for a moment. So if you've moved through this whole practice, it'd be a nice idea to take a little bit of time just laying down and relaxing, or just sitting down and letting your body really rest. I guess I'll demonstrate one more thing, and that is how to take a Shavasana, also keeping in mind the ligament that supports your uterus at your sacrum. And that is a side-lying position. I'm going to use this violin case again, because what I'll do is rest the bottom compartment of this top leg on my prop and come down either with the arms both resting in front of me, but as you can likely see, that's giving a little bit of a squish to this bottom shoulder. So if it's at all possible, without squishing this bottom breast, to take my bottom arm behind me. I can relax that on the ground, relax my head. Maybe I take a pillow under my head, relax my arm. But as you can see, my top leg, I've got that bottom compartment of it resting on a prop that's holding it as high as the hip and forward and off of the bottom leg. So it's kind of like a running posture. My back arm, my bottom arm the elbow is bent. The arm is just completely relaxed behind me, top of the hand on the ground. But if you can see, and I hope that you can here, and maybe imagine that I had a pregnant belly, that I am rolling, because of this position with my leg, I'm rolling forward toward my belly, more than I would be if I had my legs stacked. If I had them stacked, the round ligament back here, but my belly being drawn right down toward the ground in this way. When I bring my top leg forward, it rolls me more toward my belly, and the weight of my uterus can hang more directly down toward the ground from where it's attached. So spending a little bit of time in this position, if it's feasible for you to get into this position, or maybe testing it out in your bed tonight with an extra pillow underneath your top leg. But considering throughout the course of your day how you're carrying around the weight of your baby, and making sure that anatomically you're spending as much time with that weight supported in as comfortable a position as possible. Until next time, namaste.